And it is time once again to get solar powered. We welcome you back to the Solar Powered Podcast. My name is Ryan Hall from Royal Hearts Media. We thank you so much for joining us here today for episode 112. It's kind of hard to believe that we're already to 112 episodes. And I thank you so much for joining us here today. Now, my guest, I've always kind of been fascinated by our guests because the the how we met, we have several mutual friends. My dear friend and mentor Elizabeth Hill is also you know kind of tightly connected with our guest here today. We'll certainly talk about those connections, but the the quote that was kind of flashing on me when before I brought on my guest was this just iconic quote from J.R.R. Tolkien. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. And with that second line in mind, I want to bring in our guest. Her name is Robin Finney. She's a intuitive coach, model, um, very proud aunt, but she's also a world traveler in a way that I really have a hard time understanding. And she joins us now, and she's actually in the United States for once. Robin Finney, it's awesome to connect with you. Thanks for getting solar powered with us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Ryan. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely, and I'm excited. I'm excited you said yes to this. So thank you so much for diving in with us here today, kind of wandering about your story, so to speak.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, well, if you don't mind, just kind of telling us, just kind of start by introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you kind of became so enamored with wandering the world and traveling.
Yes. So I mean, I've been a wanderluster my whole life, and I studied abroad when I was in college, and that kind of just opened the whole, like literally the whole world for me. And I started to see like, oh, there's different ways of living. It's experiencing different cultures, different ways of living. And so it was really exciting. And then after college, I, went the traditional route, got a job, worked my way up the ladder into into corporate, and I started a mentality of like work to travel. And so I would save up my time, my vacation time and money, and I would travel with a couple of my really good girlfriends from college, and we would pick a country, pick a region, and go. And it just created this. And every time I would go to a new place, I would think like, oh, I just want to be here. I don't want to go, I don't want to go back. And I was even working remote at the time. And this was before like remote work was really even something that was, now it's like very common since post pandemic. But for me at the time, I didn't even know that it was what was possible. And I would go on these journeys and just hunger for more and more and more. And it was this, you have sometimes there's that idea or that something, that impulse to do something and it doesn't leave you. And they say, like, as me as like an intuitive coach and guide, I tell people like, yeah, if you have this buzzing and you know it for writing, being a writer,
Totally.
if you have an idea, like, and it doesn't go away, it keeps nagging at you, eating away at you, act on it. Either act on it or just like let yourself off the hook. But there was a part of me that was like, if I don't try, and so my motto became like, if you don't go, you don't know. So in 2018, I sold pretty much everything. My car, got my furniture, like really minimized my life down to living in a suitcase. And I quit my corporate job and I set off on a one-way ticket. And then I bought one-way tickets for the next 5 years. And I've been traveling. So I've been a nomad for 6 years now. And yeah, still going.
The living embodiment of that nomad culture, huh?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know that we follow each other on social media, and like one moment you're in the mountains, some Colorado somewhere, you're in some beautiful, Brazilian beach somewhere, and it's just it's almost kind of it's almost you've almost kind of become like the Carmen San Diego of my friendship circles.
Yeah, I'll have people ask that, where in the world are you today? Anytime I get on a call.
Yeah, it's like I was surprised you were actually in Texas when I when we connected on this podcast here. Well, I'd love to kind of dig into your story a little bit, just in how I love what you said about those little intuitive hits, those little intuitive like shoulder taps of like if there's something that just won't go away, it's like a call that just keeps on ringing. You eventually need to answer it, or else you're never going to know what might happen if you never did answer that call. And I'd love to kind of dig into that a little bit and just how that's kind of affected your journey and how that's kind of affected how you kind of built up your brand.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I didn't even when I left corporate, I honestly the only plan I had was to buy one-way tickets. I knew I was going to live off of like my savings and my car, selling my car, and so I thought, okay, I'll give myself till the end of the year and travel all over. And so I did that, and then I thought, okay, after that, I'll look at what to do next. And so that was I think like being an entrepreneur, even solopreneur, stepping into this world was definitely something that wasn't planned. I feel like I stumbled upon it, and it's very similar to when you're traveling on a journey and things shift and plans change, things fall through, or you're just following your curiosity and you just walk down a street and then you find like this hidden cafe or something. And I felt like that's kind of how stumbling into this world just really opened up something for me. And it also uncovered a lot. It's one thing when you're in corporate, somebody's hiring you to do a specific job, you grow with the same company or you grow with the same career. When you're on your own, it's very different. You're confronted by a lot. You're confronted by like, who am I to be doing this? Do I actually have any skills? And I went through an identity, I wouldn't call it crisis, but I did go through um, some identity questions around like, who am I outside of the role that I played before? Who am I even when the pandemic hit? Who am I when I'm not traveling? And so there's been like a lot of iterations of this over the years. But what I've held and stood firm with is the belief of everything is everything's working out the way that it's meant to. And as long as I keep taking one foot in front of the other, as long as I keep moving forward, things are going to show up. And that's and so it was through that and through sharing stories and journeys and people like actively reaching out and asking for support that it was birthed.
I love that. I love that. I'm hearing a lot of trust in that in what you just shared, like a lot of trust in yourself that you're going to be okay, that you're going to be able to, that you're going to be able to make your way, back home, that you're going to be wherever home might be, but you're going to be able to make your way back home, that you're going to be safe, that you're going to be supported. But I also hear a lot of trust in just like trust in the process, like the people that may be in your life that you may have met, that you may have connected with along this journey. So I'm hearing a lot of trust in what you're sharing. And I'm also hearing a lot of just, honestly, a belief that this is kind of the way to go for your life. Might not be for everybody, but it's the way to go for your life.
Yeah, and that it's interesting because I look at I mean they say thoughts create your reality, and I hadn't really thought about that. I wasn't in that world until I kind of started stepping more into coaching and the spiritual deeper like deepening my spirituality and everything. But one thing I from the beginning I said was I'm going to meet the best people and experiences. And I have. It's like I have really held that firm belief. And I've also learned to tune into my body and trust my body. So if something doesn't feel safe or doesn't feel aligned, or somebody, if I'm talking to somebody and my body, it's like for me, it's like my shoulders and back, neck start getting tense, or I know it's like I know these signals in my body now to trust that. And I've honestly, there's only been a few times that that's really shown up because I've really created that belief that this is the world that I'm walking into with as I'm traveling. And these are the situations, the people, the experiences that I'm going to attract.
I love that. I love that. And I think what comes up for me as you're sharing that is just um again, just that trust that everything's going to be okay, that you're kind of on the right path. Now, as you were sharing this, one thing came to mind is, since I moved up here from the South, since I moved up here to the New York City area, I have often told people that the best food that you're ever going to find are these little hole in the wall barbecue shacks, like out in the middle of nowhere. And you're in Texas. I'm sure you have plenty of stories about that. But what are some of the what are some of the places that you have been to that have had? I feel like I'm, you know, starting an episode of Anthony Bourdain's old show here, but what are some of the, like best hole in the wall places for food or a great cup of coffee or a great glass of wine or whatever? What are some of those places in the world that you can relate to us here?
Yeah, and it's always, I love that. That's such a great question because that's what one of the things I also do is when I show up in a place, I allow the people and the area, the city where I'm going, the country to show me. So I'm not somebody who it's really it's such a funny like just the difference because I do plan experiences for people, but for myself, I don't. I don't really plan things out. I just like to show up and have the place tell me. And so there's places that I've been where I'm just following my curiosity. I'm walking along and in Morocco and I turn down the street and I see a really cute cafe and I'm like, "Oh, I want to try that." And it's like the best like little like place where I'm getting like amazing traditional food, or I'm walking in Spain and I'm like, ooh, that looks like a great view. I'm gonna go up there for sunset. And I have like an amazing glass of wine. And it's really, I tell people, I'm like, I don't even know if it's like if the wine was that good or if it was just like the experience of the people around me and the place, the energy. Um, I mean, I do think it that speaks a lot to it, and we have a mutual friend or connection with Hannah McKittrick, and she's an intuitive chef, and she that's what like she shows people is like there's vibration in food, and it's the same thing when I'm like out and about and I'm stumbling upon these little places and I'm meeting people or somebody's saying like, "Hey, you want to come over for dinner?" It's like I'd be staying in an Airbnb in somebody's house, renting a room, and they're like, "Hey, we're outside if you want to join us." And I go, and it's the vibration of the people and the energy. And so I've stumbled upon I mean, a lot of hidden gems all over. Like Thailand, I had so many little spots like that where like you get off the main strip and that's where you begin to find like you find the street vendors and the ones who it's like you sit down and like there was this one time I was at a farmer's market in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And a mutual friend had taken me there. I didn't know, I wouldn't have found this place on my own, and it was all locals. Like we stood out, we were the minority there. And I'm like, walking around and I see this man and he's like, "Hey, come sit." And he pulls out a stool for me and I sit down and it turns out he's just an older man and he carries his sketchbook around and he loves just meeting people and sketching. And so he asked if he could sketch my portrait. And then he sat down and introduced me to his friend who makes these amazing pour over coffees, but it's not just like he makes the coffee, he actually farms the coffee and he shows up weekly at this farmer's market. And so I got to sit down and learn about the culture of the coffee. And the sketch artist spoke English, the coffee maker didn't, but we were still able to connect. And to this day, we're still Facebook friends and still like we'll still like every now and then like come across each other's profiles or pages or send each other messages.
That is that is wild because we may not all, and I say this as somebody who has never owned a passport. I want that to change this, this year, by the way. But um, we may look different. We may sound different. We may have different approaches of life. But no matter where you go, we're all human. We're all kind of after the same thing, all kind of after that same human connection. And I think that's a really beautiful part of that story is that, yeah, he may not have spoke the language, but there was that connection that you guys still have to this day.
Yeah. And I can still taste the and smell the coffee because it was so much infused into that experience. And so those are the moments that I consider priceless where I'm like, it's something I happened upon and it was all through curiosity and trust and being open to meeting people and experiencing other places and cultures.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Any stories that you can share of maybe those connections that might not have gone wrong, where it may have gone maybe a little wrong, maybe maybe there was a situation where, hey, I'm an American woman in this, foreign place. Maybe it doesn't feel so safe. Any stories like that that you want to share?
Yeah, so it's been interesting because I've been really lucky where I haven't had a lot of experiences that have felt like that. I always joke and say like anytime like I'm sick, it's always my own doing. It's like I create environmental it's like allergies or something or psychologically. And so I find that a lot of that is the same. Like a lot of it is psychological. So if you're going somewhere and you're afraid the whole time that somebody's going to steal your wallet or steal your phone, that the likelihood of that happening is greater because you're carrying that energy and you're carrying that like
I
oh
get
something
that.
could happen or if you're walking late at night and you're like oh I'm going to get lost, I'm afraid I'm going to get lost and just carrying that energy. But so I have had experiences where like I am walking home from dinner and I turn on a street and I was in Chile and I turned down a street and people had told me about this one town, like, hey, just just be on guard a little more here. But I didn't personally feel unsafe or anything. But at night it was a little different because, when the sun goes down, it can be
Right.
change things. But I turned onto a street and immediately it's like my body was like nope, get off of the street. And so I turned and I found a taxi or called an Uber right away. And I have had times where I've rented like a hotel room or an Airbnb, and when I get there, the energy just doesn't feel good. Like I'm somebody who I need light. I need a lot of light. I need windows. And so there's been a couple times where I've rented places and it looks like they have that, and then I get in the room and it's not that at all. And so there's been a few times where I'm just like, okay, you know what, I'm just going to eat the cost of this and find somewhere else because that my well-being is more important than staying somewhere that doesn't feel comfortable or safe to me. Um, So I've had many times like that where things have shown up, and I've learned it's like I'm highly adaptable. Like I'm really lucky in that sense. And traveling will cause you to be more adaptable because you're kind of it forces you to let go of things a lot quicker than you would in your quote everyday life. Um, but I've had times where it's like I'm waiting for a bus that I don't know is ever going to come, or I've gotten off on the wrong train stop and I'm like, what? I don't know about this neighborhood or where I am. Um, but every time it's like as soon as I like come back to myself and my center, a stranger appears and is there to support and ask like, hey, do you need help? Or tell me how something like how the bus actually works. So I'm not just like sitting there waiting.
I love that. I love that. You know, I just flashed on a story from me that I think kind of reflects on this is that I remember the very first time that I visited New York City, an area, a place that I ended up falling in love with and ended up moving up here. But the very first time that I went to New York City, I was super lost in Brooklyn one time. My phone was dead, and I was looking for this one train, and I could not find it to save my life. And I just happened to turn a corner and I spotted this guy. I think he was smoking a cigarette out in front of a restaurant. And I'm like, brother, do you know where you can point me to find this train? And he was like, yeah, 2 blocks that way, turn right, you can't miss it. And he was absolutely right. So it's like when like I trusted that hit in my own being. I trusted that hit in my own being. And I ended up being able to get back to my hotel and everything was fine.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up because even bringing up the fact that you don't have a passport, because that's something I teach people as well. It's like if you want to start traveling and get outside of go outside of the US or go out of your home country, start where you are. Go to a neighborhood that maybe you're not as familiar with, or where the people don't look like you, or the food is different than what you normally eat. Like you can still be cultured and experience different places even without leaving. And of course, New York City has like you turn one block and it's a completely different vibe and experience. But I love that you brought that
Yeah,
up because I think a lot of times people just look at like travel and they think like outside the US and they're like, oh, I could never do that. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't be surprised if you're not already doing parts of that where you are.
indeed, indeed. And it's like I remember the first time that I visited Southern California. I've got one of my oldest friends lives in Santa Monica, and I had flown out there 2015, I think it was, and I remember that I wanted to go to Hollywood. I mean, just to kind of see the whole touristy kind of thing, and I remember like I got pulled in by one of those kind of sketchy Hollywood tour type things. I ended up going on one that I found online, but this was just a guy who like practically tackled me, on the Sunset Strip, and like every cell in my body was like, "This is a no. This is a no. This guy's about to rip me off." And I ended up getting out of there. So but there's also a lot I think you learn about yourself and, just me using the universal you here. I think you learn a lot about yourself when you go outside of that comfort zone.
Yeah, you do. And it's like you learn, and that's where it's like it's like these experiences happen and they allow you to lean in more to relying on yourself and trusting yourself and know that it's like, okay, I've got this. And also like releasing attachment to things, because I think that's something that as you travel, it's like I've been scammed a few times, and every time I'm like, man, how did this happen? I'm so like
Like, how did
always
you miss
like,
that? Yeah.
how? Like, how did I miss that? But then I'm like, you know what? it is what it is. I'm annoyed in the moment. I'm annoyed a little after, and then I let it go. I'm like, that's it. I don't align with that type of business and people who scam people, but it is something that it's like, okay, you know what? I lived through that and I have a story to tell outside of it. And now I know, like, next time it's like, okay, I can listen to those cues. And it's like you listen to your body and you honored that. Your body was like, hey, I don't know about this. And you got yourself out. And so it's
Yep.
learning to honor yourself as well.
Yeah, it's just it's kind of like if you go to Times Square and there's all those, there's all those people dressed up like like Mario characters and Nintendo characters. And like I've heard stories about them, if you ever try to take a picture with them, they're going to shake you down for money. So there's, you've got to keep your head on a swivel, but you've also got to have kind of I think a modicum, at least a modicum of trust that again everything's going to be okay, and you're gonna find your way back home.
Right.
Kind of, getting back to this. I remember somebody asked me a question, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this. I remember somebody asking me a question, just a very simple question of, you got any travel plans this summer? And my initial reaction was like, of course I don't have any travel plans this summer. I work too much. I've got no money. I've got no way to get out. And I still kind of like, I'd love to go home to Alabama at least to, visit friends and family down there. But I don't have the money. And I know you're developing and are about to release a course on kind of this, you call it the solo travel experience, SOULO, solo. I love the connection on that. But like, what are some ideas, like somebody like me who's kind of looking to get out but may kind of have like blinders on, is like, hey, I don't know how I'd be able to pay for a plane ticket, or pay for a train ticket or whatever. Kind of share a little bit about that, and just how people can kind of get out of that mindset.
Yeah, so I always like to say it comes down to what you value and also sometimes making sacrifices. So you may like I value eating good quality food, and that's always been something that I'm like I'm going to spend a little more on food. Maybe I won't eat out as much. I'll cook at home more. So if you're somebody who you eat out more, it's like even if you cut out a couple meals a month, like that, there's that right there could be a plane ticket because meals or eating out is getting more and more expensive. But there's resources too. So there's different apps that I use like Skyscanner where you can, like, if you can be a little flexible with your timing and which airports you fly out of, you can literally search, like, you can put in your state or you can put in United States and then the city or place where you want to go. And it will come and then tell you like suggested times and you can find deals that way. So for you, it's like if you wanted to go to Alabama, you could look at like, okay, let me look at like flying into Birmingham or flying into Atlanta or flying into Nashville or Chattanooga or just seeing like different, if you have that flexibility, finding different ones. And so like Brazil, I've been not, many people may not know,
Right.
but I've been living in Brazil off and on for the past year, and I've come back to the States for different events or to see family or friends or just take care of different personal things in the US. And I I always tend to find a really good deal somewhere. And I always say it comes down to like when you're meant to go somewhere, it's going to work out. It's going to align. So also just creating that. And so this last time when I came back from Brazil, I flew to Austin and I found a ticket that normally it's like I come to Dallas but I found a ticket for like it was like $285 or something one way back to Austin. And then I bought a bus ticket for $40. And I flew into Austin and then I took a bus to Dallas. And right, whereas if I'd flown directly into Dallas, it would have been $700 one way. So
Oh
I ended
wow.
up saving about $300. Now I did add a lot more time. So for some people, time is more valuable than money. And so it really comes down to like your resources and where you can create some leeway there. And also looking at like lodging is that's a big area. And so I've been, especially if you're nomadic or if you know you're going to go somewhere long term for a bit, house sitting is a really great way. There's like Trusted House Sitters is a site that many people utilize where you can find long-term house sits all over the world and you apply and can get accepted that way, or friends, like finding out, like putting it out there to your audience and saying like, hey, I'm coming or looking to come these dates. Does anybody know of anyone or have an extra room? Or so being a little flexible there um, can be supportive as well. And then also maximizing, like if you use credit cards, and even if you don't use credit cards, there's ways that you can earn points for airlines and or get like airline specific credit cards or travel credit cards that will give you points so that you can go to different destinations or stay in different hotels at a fraction of the cost. So there's many ways like that that I'll definitely be covering in the course.
So what you're saying is you're not stuck if you know how to look in the right places.
Yeah, and I would say like if where there's a will, there's a way. So if there's somewhere that you want to go, then the way will appear.
I love that. I love that. I think that's a powerful, I think that's a powerful testimony on the idea that there's no one particular way to do something. There's no one particular way to, you know, to travel. There's no one particular way to do any of this stuff. And I think that's a powerful testimony of just having the flexibility and also having the um improvisational skills, I guess, to be able to remember that everything is figure outable.
Everything, yes. Yeah. And you can there's always ways. It's like, hey, you can take a month off of Netflix. You can take a month off of, there's different cuts and corners that you can make. You can make
Yeah,
coffee at home rather than going out. And some people don't want to do that. And I completely understand. And it's something where it's like you can always make it happen.
there's definitely a way. There's definitely a way. Um, Now I would love to talk a little bit about because your branding I've always found very fascinating. Your branding, you call yourself the wandering ant. You're a proud ant, and I'd love to kind of hear about how that branding, how that kind of persona came out.
Yeah, so it actually started with a blog. I started a blog in 2016, I believe. And I wanted to combine my two interests, my two things that most meaning to me, which is travel and being an auntie. And I have five littles, and at the time when I started, I had two littles, and I knew that I wanted to infuse them into my lifestyle. I wanted to make it a priority. So coming back to the States, like when I left and started my nomad life, I created like my two values are, or highest values are freedom and flexibility. So I wanted to create a lifestyle where I could be where I wanted, when I wanted, and be able to come back and spend time with my littles so that I'm active in their life and also showing them that there's different ways to live and that whatever it is that they want to create, that there is a way. And so Wandering Ant was birthed that way, and it started out with me just sharing stories and learning life learnings experiences from everyday life challenges, things I was learning, and then my travels and writing about that. And so I've been writing since then. It's been a while since I've written an actual blog. That's something that I've been thinking lately. It's like starting, as a writer, it's like you kind of go through seasons and then it will start to spark again. So I'm feeling that spark again, but I've carried that brand name throughout. It's my Instagram handle, it's my website. And so I've continued to carry that essence with me.
I love that. Almost like a leading by example of, hey, I can do this. If you want to do this, there are ways that you can create this out of your own life. I just I love the idea of just like leading by example like that.
Yeah, and it gets my little like it gets their ideas, their wheels turning, and I've told them all like when you're 16, I'll take you somewhere. So when my oldest was 16, we were originally supposed to go to London, but the pandemic hit, and so we ended up going to Chicago, and it was such an eye-opening experience for them, and they ended up like now they're working and saving up money and traveling, and they just went to New York, 18 years old, went to New York City with a friend for 2 weeks, and saving up for a passport now. And so I'm like, if I can instill that, and my 11-year-old niece is already talking about like where she wants to go when she turns 16 and the places that she wants to experience in this world. And so it just, for me, it's like if I can instill that in them and show them that there's so much out there, then it's the most rewarding thing.
I love that. I love that. And I think there's really a lesson to learn for, all of us watching and listening to this um is like you said, where it's a cliche, but it's very true. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it
And
really
just
is, it teaches us like you can be resourceful and you can adapt and things like you meet the right people you're meant to meet.
that is awesome. Well, we're just about to wrap up here, and I've got two more big questions that I want to ask you. First of all, you're also an intuitive travel coach. You support people in kind of finding their own way out in the world. Can you talk a little bit about how kind of that came about and how people can end up working with you?
Yeah. So that was another area that I recognized that I was having people reach out to me and ask questions like, hey, how do you do this? Or, hey, I'm so inspired by what you do, or I live vicariously through you. And I started seeing themes and recognizing that there is a desire for many people to do this. And a lot of people don't know how to start, or they don't believe that they don't have that belief set that they can do it on their own. And so that's why it's like why you hire somebody to support. It's why you hire a writing coach. It's why you work with a mentor or a publisher, an editor. You have somebody support you in planning your experience. And so I started offering sessions to support people in going on their own solo SOULO experiences. And through that, I've had clients who, like you, have didn't have a passport before, and they came with me, and came to me, and I supported them in getting their passport and planning their experience and creating intentions for their journey and showing them like, hey, okay, we can plan this out if you want, and let's leave some wiggle room. And I had one client who was a lot more type A and wanted to plan everything out. And so I said, okay, I will honor that if you want, and hold your plans loosely because things change and you may get there and decide like, hey, I don't want to, maybe I want to try something else. And that's exactly what happened. She got there and she ended up meeting locals, and they were telling her like, actually, no, don't go to that place. Go, this is better. And so she would just like change her plans. And she said, I would have never done this before had I not worked with you and just opened myself up to it and gone on my own solo journey. And so it's a lot of that and supporting people. And so I have different ways, like I do pre-trip sessions with people if they just or if they're just looking for somebody to support them and creating the intentions and how they want to feel on their experience. And then we do a debrief session after the journey. And then people who are actually wanting to go on a journey have 3 and 6 month packages where we dive pretty deep. And I also plan the experience for them as well.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And I know you've got a new online course that you're super proud about. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's called The Art of Solo Travel. Discover the world, discover yourself. And it's really going to support people in starting from the pre-trip, like where you want to go, the planning, the logistics, all the things you need to do to prepare, like packing light, how to, where to stay with where you're going, and then going deeper into intention setting, learning to trust your body, call in your travel guide. So it goes a lot deeper. So it's designed to kind of take you on a progression. So at the end, you feel really equipped to step out either on your own, or even if you're not a solo traveler, it will still change the way that you show up for travel experiences going forward.
I love that. And we'll certainly include links to all of this stuff in the description of this podcast. One last question. If anybody's out there who may have heard my story of, maybe never having traveled abroad before, or if there's a new place out there that you're looking to kind of tick off that bucket list, um, any kind of practical words of wisdom that you can offer to somebody who maybe just looking to kind of dip their toe into this, or they just want to dive right into the deep end?
Yeah, so with anything, nothing happens without commitment. So I would say if there's somewhere that you've been dreaming of going, even if it doesn't seem possible right now, go ahead and set a date and say, like, July 30th, 2025, I'm going to Japan. And then Japan, I guarantee things for Japan are going to start showing up. You'll start seeing, you'll start meeting people who maybe just come from Japan or going to Japan or live there. You'll start seeing travel deals there, but go ahead and like put something in existence so that you have something that you're working towards. Even if you're like, because plane tickets these days, they're so flexible with terms. So unless you're buying like basic economy, which I don't often recommend that, but otherwise it's like, even if you just book a cheap ticket somewhere, if you see a deal somewhere and you just book a ticket and then it gets closer and you decide like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this or something else changes, it's like you can shift and you'll get a credit or something for that on your with the airline. But start looking, and even if you lose out on the money, like I mean, I'm always going to be an advocate for showing up and doing it, but come to the edge, like really come to the edge and put yourself there and just stick with it. It's like the same as if you're writing a book and you're like, you can talk about it all day long, but until you sit down, pen to paper, or start typing something on your keyboard or computer, it's like it's all up here. So you've got to start like taking some type of micro action and just putting it into existence.
Just take that action. I think that's a great note to leave this conversation here. Robin Finney, this has been, I think, an enlightening conversation for me, and I hope really an enlightening conversation for our audience. And again, thank you for getting solar powered with me today.
Thank you. This has been a real treat.
All right. How can people find you online, my friend?
Yes, so just look for Wandering Ant, AUNT. You'll find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok,
All the places.
all the places, my website, all
Uh,
of that.
all right, Robin, it's been a real thrill, and thank you so much for joining us here today on the Solar Powered Podcast, a presentation of Royal Hearts Media. For more information about me, just go to royalheartsmedia.com. You can find me on the social media machine at Ryan Hall Writes on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or just shoot me a good old fashioned email at royalheartscoaching@gmail.com. But that'll do it for this episode. Until we meet again, this is Ryan Hall saying thanks for listening. So long for now, and go get solar power.